Hello fashion designers, fashion lovers. Join me today. Let's make this beautiful peasant gown or gypsy gown. As you can see, this gown has 3 steps on the lower part, which are all cut straight and gathered. So if you're interested in learning how to make this gypsy gown, join me. Let's dive into the pattern drafting of the upper part. So I began by drafting it on my pattern paper. So I went ahead and measured my shoulder divided by 2, and I drew my armhole line. I went ahead and measured my neckline of 3 inches by 3, and I used my curve ruler to draw the neckline. And on the armhole line, I went down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and I connected it to the neckline. So to get your perfect armhole measurement, divide your bust circumference by 6, and then you add 1.5 inches to it. So I calculated mine, and it was 7.5. So I'm going to measure 7.5 from the shoulder slant and draw my armhole line. At the midpoint of the armhole line, that is where I'm going to place my across chest measurement divided by 2. So the next thing I'll do is to measure my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, and my shoulder to waist measurements. So I'll measure it across my pattern paper, and then I'm going to use a long ruler to draw my lines. So I needed a longer ruler. So I'm going to draw my bust line. And then this is my under bust line. And for my waistline, I'm using the end of my pattern paper as my waistline. So my bust span measurement is 3.5. So I'm going to measure it and draw the line. That is the nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. On the armhole line, I'm going to go up by 3/4 inch. That is at the angle 90. And then I'll curve my armhole curve. On this midpoint of my armhole, I'm going to draw a line to meet my bust point. So on that line, I'm going to go up by 1 inch, and I'll also come down by 1 inch. On the bust point, I'm going up by 1/2 inch and down by 1/2 inch, and I'll connect my armhole princess dart to the bust point. Same with the lower point. On this lower line, I'm going to extend it upward so that it meets with the other point when we are sewing. So the extension is 2 inches, and this gives us a new armhole curve. So I'm going to place my curve ruler and draw my new armhole curve. So this is our princess armhole bustier line. On the under bust line, I'm going to take 3/4 inches on both sides of the dart line. And I'm going to connect from the under bust to the waistline with straight lines. and from the bust point, or from the 1/2 inch below the bust point, I'm going to link it to the underbust. So I'm taking my time to place my curve ruler well. I'll do same for the other side. And if you find your bust point too sharp, you can bring in your curve ruler to smoothen the curve. So the next thing I'll do is to begin placing my round measurements. So I begin with the bust circumference. I divide it by 4 and place my measurement, and I added 1 inch of seam allowance. For the under bust, I'm also going to divide it by 4. I'll mark the measurements, and then I'll replace my dart and also add 1 inch of seam allowance. And I'll do same for the waistline. So always make sure to replace your dart and then your seam allowance. You can as well cut it without seam allowance, and you add your seam allowance when transferring to the fabric. So for this front part I'm done. I'm going to start drawing the back part. So I measure from the front part to see where the back part will begin. So this line I've drawn is my center back line. So I'm going to begin by placing my shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I'll draw the line. My shoulder slope is 1 inch, and I'll measure my neck width 3 inches and neck depth of 1 inch. The next thing I'm going to do is to draw my shoulder slope line, and I'll measure the I'll measure my shoulder line and my armhole line, and then from there I'll get the midpoint of my armhole line, and that is where I'm going to measure my across back measurement. And that will help me to draw my shoulder or my armhole curve perfectly. That's the armhole curve. So I'm going ahead to draw my dart line for the back part. For the dart line, I'm going up by 7 inches from the waistline, and on the dart leg I'm taking out 1/2 inch on both sides, and I'll connect it. At the center back, I'm going to measure my back half length. I was supposed to do this first before placing my dart measurement. My back half length is 1 inch shorter than the front half length. So I'm going to measure it, and on that line I will do my darts again before going ahead. So I'm going to take out 1 inch dart at the side front, so that the two sides should match, both front and back. At the center back, I'm going to take out 1/2 inch, and then I connect it back to the center back line. like so. This is to tighten this back waist to avoid any bulging at the zip area. So I'm going to measure my bust round divided by 4. I place it, I replace my dart and add my sewing allowance. Same thing for the waistline. If you are just joining us, please like this video, comment and share. If you have not yet subscribed, please do well to subscribe to this channel. So from that new line at the center back, I'm going to measure 1 inch outwards for my zipper allowance. So this is my zipper allowance. I'll connect it to my neckline. And I'll label it Z. So that is it for the back part and the front part. So I'm going to begin by cutting the front part. I'm going to close the side dart so that the back and front half length become equal. And I'll continue my cutting. So this is the side front. I'll continue cutting my center front. These are the two front parts, the side front and center front. So I'll continue cutting the back part. So this is the back part and the front part. So we are going to move over to the Ankara fabric. We are going to be using this Ankara fabric for this Peasant dress. So this Ankara comes in 6 yards folded, and I'm going to cut the last part, the last step under. That is 6 yards of Ankara. So this last step I'm cutting it straight and it is 6 yards long. So I divided my lower part into 3 equal parts, and I'm going to cut each step separately. So for the second step or the middle step, I'm going to take out 2 yards. I'm taking out 2 yards from the remaining Ankara, and I'll fold the remaining 4 yards. And on this remaining 4 yards, I'm going to measure the second step. So each step is longer than the previous step. The smallest step is the first one, followed by the second one, and the longest step is the third one under. So this is the second step I'm cutting. We are going to be pleating that last step on this second step, which is 4 yards, and the last step is 6 yards. So this is our second part, and this remaining fabric is 4 yards. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to remove 2 yards. So I will separate it, take out 2 yards, and we are going to use the remaining 2 yards to cut our first step. That is the step that is going to be joined to the half length. So this is our 2 yards. So I'm going to measure the first step from here, and I'll cut it out. So I'm taking 14 inches for this first step. And I'll cut it out. So we have our first, second and third steps of 2 2 yards, 4 yards and 6 yards. Each will be pleated on top of the other. So we are going to go ahead now and use the remaining Ankara fabric to cut our upper part, both the back and the front. So I'm just going to be pinning the pattern paper on the fabric and then I'll cut it out after adding the necessary seam allowances. At the waistline, I'm going to add 1/2 inch of sewing allowance. On the shoulder part, 1/2 inch of sewing allowance. For the sides, I already added the allowance on the pattern paper, so we don't need to add again. The next part I'm going to cut out is the center front part, which is supposed to be on fold. So I folded my fabric into 2 and I pin it to align at the edge of the folded side. Make sure it aligns well. So I'm going to add 1/2 inch at the waistline and 1/2 inch at the dart line. That's the allowance that we are going to join the center front and the side front. And on the shoulder, I'm adding 1/2 inch of sewing allowance. Then I'm going to cut it through. And for the side front, I'm also going to pin it on the fabric, on the Ankara. Then I will add my necessary allowances and then cut it out. So that is it for the front and the back parts. So the next thing I'll do is to cut the lining for all the upper parts. So to cut the lining, you just need to place your fabric on the lining and cut it same as your main fabric. So we are going to go ahead and cut the sleeves for this peasant or gypsy gown. So I folded my fabric into 2 and then folded again so that I can cut the 2 sleeves at once. So I placed my sleeve length, which is very short. I wanted a very short sleeve. I have a tutorial on this channel that is very detailed, gives us details on how to draft a basic sleeve. So you can go and watch that video to know how to cut your basic sleeve. So I'm measuring my armhole round to make sure it is exactly as on the dress. And now my arm round measurements, and I'm going to cut it out. So if you're here with us, do not forget to like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to the next video. That will be the sewing part.